So over the past few months, we have been making a ton of videos about one of the guys that defined the NHL for more than a generation. A literal generational player, and a guy whose name is cemented amongst the best of all time in the NHL conversation. He's like top 5, top 6 probably. You could debate he's on the Mount Rushmore. Today we are heading over to the Pittsburgh Penguins and talking about a guy in Sidney Crosby. Because when it comes to Crosby and his overall future with the NHL club, we had ourselves some word from Elliotte Friedman that goes out there and discusses this. Now, you know me. I like a little bit of foreplay in the commentary. I don't like to just go right into the big update. I like to set the stage. Because when it comes to Crosby, the past few videos on this YouTube channel have all kind of been about the same thing. Hey, Sid the Kid is no longer a kid, he's 36 years old, and he's expiring at the end of 24-25 at $8.7 million a year. Is there a possibility, due to the Pittsburgh Penguins' projected lack of success in the next little while, that Sidney Crosby finds himself on some other team? We had talked about the Montreal Canadiens, we had talked about the Colorado Avalanche, the Vancouver Canucks even were discussed as a potential option. We've made all these videos, they've all been fun conversations to have, but when it comes to Elliotte Friedman and his recent thought on the latest 32 Thoughts podcast, we had ourselves some inklings from him as to where this entire Crosby future conversation could go. The tweet comes to us from NHL Watcher, and it opens up a pretty big discussion as to what we could see out of Crosby's next deal. Friedman on 32 Thoughts guesses that it's going to be 3x10 or 3x10.5. Now, this is an interesting idea, mostly because when it comes to Sidney Crosby re-signing with Pittsburgh, okay, that's like fine. We could all acknowledge that's probably like the most likely outcome here. If you had to rank the Sidney Crosby sweepstakes, you have Pittsburgh in there, Montreal, Colorado, Vancouver, the same teams we had talked about. If you were to rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, you'd have like Pittsburgh with the 99.99 percentile odds of getting Crosby back, and then the rest of these teams would just kind of diversify that final 0.0001% or whatever it is. Crosby and the Penguins is a match made in heaven. He saved Pittsburgh from relocation. He was part of a franchise that was able to win and win and win and win. 4 Stanley Cup Finals appearances, 3 Stanley Cups, period. And he did this all with Malkin and Letang. 3 guys, all together in Pittsburgh, absolute legends. But when it comes to the contract negotiations, look, when it comes to what Crosby has been doing this season, 10.5, 10 million, whatever it is, that's kind of worth it for a guy who, right now, is at 60 points in 55 games played. He's on pace for about 90 points in a full season's worth of play right now, and it is kind of nuts considering that he's doing all of this at the ripe old age of 36. I remember back in 2016 or whenever it was, we were having conversations from Crosby saying, yeah, he'll probably play until he's 35, and then he'll try to maybe retire then. I think there was a comment that he made himself, that he wants to get to at least 35 and then see what happens, but back then, Sidney Crosby was winning Art Ross trophies. Now, he's still scoring at a pace that probably is equivalent, and you could say that he's not winning any Art Rosses anytime soon nowadays, but still, being on a 90-point pace at 36 years old is quite remarkable. And if there is some sort of a 3-year extension that goes from 2025, 2026, all the way to 2028 or 2029, look, Sidney Crosby, being as good as he is right now, can he keep this up till he's 40? Maybe not at a $10.5 million caliber pace, but then again, never doubt Sid the Kid, right? Now, the interesting thing about this entire conversation, and it's why I'm making this video in the first place, is because of some of the replies and responding ideas. When Friedman says, oh yeah, Crosby may sign with Pittsburgh at a 3-year, 10-point-something million dollar AAV deal, you have replies like this from Katie saying, wait a minute, I thought Crosby was always paid $8.7 million a year. NHL Watcher then replies, yeah, he might have to change his number then. And I know the majority of my viewer base on this YouTube channel, we're mostly adults here, but there are some kids that are a lot younger and in their teens and in their high school years. Let's just let you in on a little bit of a secret. Maybe this is not common knowledge nowadays compared to when it was, 20 years ago, but Sidney Crosby has 87 for a reason. He was born on August 7th, 1987, so that's 8787. His AAV amount has been 8.7 million for pretty much his entire career, and that's been the brand that Crosby has built for himself over the years. Ever since 08-09, he has been making $8.7 million a year every single year. Now, that number changes up from year to year in terms of the actual dollars earned, but the AAV has always been 8.7, so that's kind of the meme here. Maybe not even a meme, that's not the right word to use. It's just been constant. Every single year, 8.7. And a bunch of these replies go out there and say, yeah, no, it'll be 8.7. It's not going to be 10. It's not going to be 9. It's not going to be 11. Like 8.7, he'll probably just do that over and over and over again. And even funnier in this conversation is the fact that if he does sign, let's say, a $10.5 million contract, all of a sudden, the fact that it's going to be Kyle Dubas inking this deal adds another level of hilarity to this entire discourse. Here's a reply from I Hate My Favorite Teams. I've been seeing a lot of people defending Kyle Dubas, saying you have to overpay Crosby for taking a discount for years. You absolutely do not. And this tweet is responding to the perspective that says, hey, Crosby should make like 11, Crosby should make like 12, who cares what the smaller amount is? Give him as much money as he gosh darn needs because he's been the face of this franchise for 20 years and he's made $8.7 million a year the entire time. This is a guy who, if there's anybody that deserves to get that pay raise, it's him. Doesn't matter if it screws you up in the cap space for the next few years. Doesn't matter if it holds back your team from being able to remain competitive. This guy captained you to 3 Stanley Cups. This guy deserves it. And then there is another reply saying, okay, yeah, I mean, Kyle Dubas is poor at negotiating contracts with star players. Time is a flat circle. And furthermore, you had Cake McJabe going out there and replying to the NHL Watcher tweet, Crosby asking for more money than he's ever made at age 38 while Dubas is his boss would be absolutely beautiful stuff. Further replies going out there and saying, I mean, he's been underpaid for years. He was always going to get a raise. It's pretty rare to see guys in their late 30s make north of $10 million. But essentially, there's no real winning in this situation. Like, if Sidney Crosby signs for $8.7 million for 3 years or whatever, then everybody's going to be like, okay, I mean, he did it. Kyle Dubas went out there and signed a guy to a contract that's probably a really good deal for the team, but man, you are underpaying Crosby. He deserves a lot more. But if you overpay him, it's like, yeah, look at that. Kyle Dubas is overpaying star veterans again. He's never learned. He did exactly the same thing in Toronto. He did the same thing upon arriving in Pittsburgh by making that Erik Carlsson trade. And now he's signing Sid the Kid to money that he debatably shouldn't be getting considering how old he is. I mean, yeah, there are perspectives on both sides that make sense here. Do you want to pay Crosby a little amount of money because he's old? Or do you want to pay him a lot of money because he's overdue? These two ideas conflict, and ultimately, it doesn't spell a positive outcome either way for Kyle Dubas, because you're just going to get memes over and over again of Toronto Maple Leafs fans talking about how Dubas is overpaying guys again, and then you have the opposing perspective that says, yeah, I mean, you're underballing Crosby, what are you doing? At the end of the day, at the very least, he is a good player, so whatever dollar amount he gets, I mean, 8.7 to 10 million, 11 million, if you get a 90-point player who is producing at that rate, then $11 million is kind of fine, especially for Sidney Crosby, who has that name attached to him, who has that star power, that status, that deity-like aura amongst this sport. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What are your opinions about this entire conversation about Crosby and his future? Elliotte Friedman went out there and talked about this on the podcast. What are your thoughts on his analyses in this entire discussion? What do you think this means for the idea of Crosby going to another team? If you're a fan of the Avalanche, the Canucks, or the Montreal Canadiens, did you ever think it was a possibility that Sid the Kid could find himself onto your squad? I know in the comment section of the last videos we did have a few discussions there, and y'all were sort of on the pessimistic side. Mostly, I'd say, yeah, there's no way Crosby is coming to Vancouver. It'd be cool, but it's no way happening. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below in general as to what you feel about this Crosby conversion from this year to next year into his next contract. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.